All right, we're gonna get started here. Let me get my perfect. Thank you. All right, so welcome. This is the JP Morgan Small Company Survival Guide webinar. The collaboration between Big4Bio and Clinically Media started with a webinar in early November. It was a navigating just kind of general JP Morgan informational webinar. Big4Bio has in the past put out this amazing guide called On Your Mark. And this year, instead of that, there's a really fantastic webinar series. So this one, after some amazing feedback that the first one was great, but really as a small company, we need advice that is for us and that can actually guide us to events and to resources that are appropriate for a company of our size, and then we aren't just going to get swallowed up in. So aim to please. I'm Victoria Donovan of Clinically Media, moderating today's discussion. My company is a firm specializing in connecting clinical research studies with the very specific patients needed to fill enrollment goals. And really at our core, we are a communications and marketing team and are super excited to be able to really pull those skills into producing these webinars. We have an amazing turnout. We've got 80 people joined already, and I keep hearing people ding in. So the amazing turnout's really testament yet again that this conversation is significant and that I'm really, truly, deeply honored to have the opportunity to moderate this event and disperse this information. So the knowledge and expertise you're going to gain from our discussion today, coupled with the invaluable resources we're about to introduce, it's going to set you on a path to excellence and success as you're preparing for January, which is coming up fast. So thank you for being part of the conversation, and I'm super excited to dive into this with you. Next slide. All right, so I kind of set the stage a little bit for this agenda. Earlier on, we were waiting for people to join the session. We're going to start with panelist introductions. I can't wait to introduce you to our three panelists, and I want you to meet them before we get into the resources, because it'll set the stage for you to be able to ask questions and really get your gears turning on who you have available to you to answer the things that are keeping you up at night and really those real questions. We'll then go into sponsors and resources. This will take about 10 minutes. We have incredible resources and support that's available to specifically small companies as you're gearing up for JPM week in January. We've really partnered with some of the top names in the industry to ensure that specifically, again, small companies have access to a top-notch lineup of resources that will really, truly, actually enhance your JPM experiences and just going to drain your bank account. These resources are not just valuable, they really have the potential to make a significant difference as you're preparing and as you're really assessing the ROI, if you will, of your JP Morgan week. Then the good stuff, we have about an hour-ish scheduled for panel discussions. I say ish because that can sometimes pull into the question and answer section, which is really the most fun, and I want to make sure we have enough time for that. Our esteemed panelists, industry experts, they understand your pain points, specifically for small companies, and are going to be able to provide actionable solutions and insights that help you navigate the upcoming conference successfully. Then we'll have a Q&A. This is going to be your chance to engage directly with our panelists. If you have specific questions or need clarification on a topic discussed during the panel, don't hesitate to ask. Put your questions in the chat or raise your hand, probably better in the chat if it's during the panel, and we'll call on you or read your question aloud. Wait for us to call on you and pull you into the conversation. We're here for you. We're here to address your inquiries, so please don't be shy and get your questions, your burning questions answered. And then we have some closing remarks. I've got a couple of final upcoming resources that you should be aware of, and we'll share how you can stay connected with us for future discussions and future resources that become available, including a recording of this webinar. All right, next slide. All right, without further ado, and before diving into our fantastic resources available, I want to introduce our remarkable, truly remarkable panel of experts right here, right now, ready to answer your questions, but after resources. So first up, we have Hoyt Morgan. Currently, Hoyt is founder and managing director at JPM Morgan, a VC firm. He has past experience as co-founder and CEO, really setting him up with expertise hardly begins to describe what he has, but the ability to truly guide smaller companies through early stage funding, as well as product and science validation, and then ultimately guiding them through exit. JPM Morgan funds later stage life science companies. So he has a particular interest in IDing earlier stage companies that are going to set him up for attractive investments down the road. We're super lucky to have him here, and I encourage you to ask Hoyt any questions that come up around funding and really what he's looking for in an investment. Next up, we have Adrian Rupstein, a life science strategist with over 10 years of experience working with pharma companies and hospitals. He is currently CEO of Big4Bio, which is an advisory firm that assists investors with their due diligence to assess the potential for new investments. And then he also advises companies on their fundraising and strategy process and figures out how to position their assets to fill the pharma pipeline and really ID where that sweet spot is to partner. He's super fun to chat with. He is so knowledgeable. He knows his stuff, is a straight shooter, but is still very kind and fun to chat with. So glad he's available to join us today. And similarly to Hoyt, please ask him any questions and utilize him as a resource. He's amazing. And finally, we have Sarah Mitchellmore, who is Managing Director of Investment Relations at McDougall Advisors. She brings 25 years of experience working with companies of all sizes, but including early stage smaller companies on business and capital formation strategy. She's determined how to position companies, how to build their equity story. She crafts investor and business development pitches and works with executives on presentation skills and strategies. She's been to at least 10 JPMs. She brings 15 years of experience working as a Wall Street sell-side analyst and another few in healthcare management consulting and advisory. So market assessment, forecasting, valuation analysis, investor position and outreach. She's a killer. I'm so stoked to have her here. And she's really an expert on the pitch and putting them together and making sure that they land and actually raise you money. So if you have specific questions for our panelists, again, put them in the chat. We're going to try to get to all of them and wait to be called on if you raise your hand. That's another option for asking questions. All of our panelists have been linked in the chat, so connect with them on LinkedIn, and we're going to get into our resources here. Next slide. Okay, first and foremost, I want to express Big4Bio and Clinically Media's heartfelt gratitude to our webinar's really premier sponsor, which is Bio, the absolute perfect premier sponsor. Their support and involvement in this webinar, and really the previous one we did too, reflects their commitment to advancing biotechnology worldwide, and specifically in the innovation economy and with smaller companies who are just starting up and who are going to be the future of biotech and really of healthcare. So Bio is the world's, sure you've heard of them, the world's largest advocacy association for the biotech industry, representing member companies, state biotech groups, academic and research institutions, and related organizations across the US and in 30 plus countries. Join them this upcoming JPM week at the San Francisco Marriott Marquis. and use their bio one-on-one partnering system to efficiently arrange meetings with biotechs, investors, in-licensors, medical device and medtech companies, and other life science leaders, regardless of if you're registered for a specific event during JPM week. So you don't need to be going to the conference to be, or the official conference to be using this app. You can just join the one-on-one partnering through bio. Participation is open to both in-person and virtual attendees. A lot of people are utilizing this app, and I see a few people's name I recognize in the participants list right now who I know are using it this coming year. So if you have any advice, please drop it in the chat. Last year, they had 5,700 meetings scheduled through their partnering system, and they've added 40% more in-person meeting tables this year. So there's going to be even more meetings. Both registration and the partnering system for JPM week are officially open, and participants have already begun scheduling meetings. If you're thinking about doing this, you need to get in there and get started. People's time is valuable and spots are filling up. Bio's currently setting the record for investor participation at this year's event. So it's a good time to get involved if you haven't yet, especially as a fundraising small company. We're going to drop some information in the chat, or it looks like it is already in there. If you have questions, email that biopartnering@bio.org. Otherwise, check out the links and explore for yourself. I'm going to talk a little bit about the app because it's really cool, and I think that's actually a little more, well, it's all relevant. The Bio and Novature Adventure Guide to JPM 2024 mobile app is free for download. It's available in the app stores. There are 2 QR codes on this page, and I'm pretty sure they work. We had a little bit of an issue with them earlier, so if they don't, go right to the meeting chat and click on the link there. That'll bring you right to the right place. So it has 2024 events in it. It's up and ready. Things are being added constantly. You can browse the entire list. You can save your favorites. The app allows you to share events, quick links to RSVP, location info. It's really meant to be a full companion to help you plan and schedule your week and navigate each event while you're in San Francisco. Anyone can submit their event to be included in the app through Bio's website, also completely free. And if that QR code isn't working, email the biopartnering@bio.org for info on how to do that. All right, let's move on to our next resource. Well, the link works. That's great. All right, I'm going to start talking while it's coming up. Erin Black should be pinned right now so that you can get a hold of her. And I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit while we're waiting for this to come up. The next resource we have is, all right, we're good to go, is Mazzetti. Thank you to Erin Black, who's in the audience, she's pinned, and Terry Stelter, who will be joining us soon, for your support. We love Mazzetti here at Clinically Media. They're an employee-owned benefit corporation incorporated in the state of California, and they're committed to creating healthier, enduring environments, specifically bending the climate curve. Their story began with a small team of MEP engineers. Almost 60 years later, they have grown to over 230 people in 11 locations across the US, India, and actually even more recently, Africa, with diverse expertise that really addresses the spectrum of their clients' needs in the environment that they're building in. Mazzetti seeks and delivers meaningful outcomes. They design technically complex facilities that span not only life sciences, but also healthcare and kind of part of life sciences, but also mission critical in aviation and sectors that are energy intensive. And they have a really, really high impact relationship with their communities. It's a special calling. They deliver the greatest lasting positive impact that has spanned 20 years, that has spanned 20 countries around the globe. They're amazing. Specifically, their life science team are experts in R&D laboratory environments, pilot plants, manufacturing and process infrastructure. They support clients like you in biotech, biopharma, med tech, and the growing food tech markets, which is exciting and new. So thank you, Ms. Eddy, for being here. In the chat, there will be you can reach out to Aaron and Terry and the team. They're well connected. They're here to help. Highly recommend just chatting with them. They may know somebody that could help you, and you may know somebody that could help them. All right, our next resource is Resi, coming to you from Life Science Nation. So Resi JPM 2024. This is going to be held January 9th in person. It's a sub-conference, if you will, or a parallel conference that happens at the same time JPM happens. So it's in person January 9th and then virtual January 10th and 11th. The Resi conference series connects startups. It's really partnering, connects startups and early stage investors and strategic channel partners. Resi maximizes fundraising companies' efforts to find partners who are a good fit for their technology and stage of development. Resi is uniquely cross-border, cross-domain, connecting startups with 10 categories of global investors across the silos of drug, devices, diagnostics, and digital health, which are the 4Ds, which is the same kind of Big4Bio. Resi caters to both the earliest stage startups, those seeking grants, seed and angel capital, and early stage firms who seek Series A and B funding. Resi is unique, it's powerful, it's a great tool for sourcing assets and advancing innovation across early stage startup science and healthcare. You get a ton with Resi. There's more than 500 investors and strategic partners in their program, over 500 fundraising companies, over 200 service providers, over 100 meeting slots per attendee, and plus cool like workshops, entrepreneurial educational opportunities. There's 14 at least of these panels and different learning opportunities so that you're not just there asking for money, but you can actually get something a little bit more out of this. And finally, over 50 pitch slots and a chance to win and compete in Resi's Innovator Pitch Challenge. Again, there's some info in the chat to register for Resi JPM 2024. There's a code here for $200 off, and we hope that we see you there. All right, next up, we have an opportunity for an amazing dinner and networking event hosted by Biotech Networks. This will be on January 8th, again, during the JP Morgan conference. JPM, Biotech Showcase, Resi, and BioInc partner attendees are all free with a conference name badge. I think you still do have to register, but you are allowed to go in for free. Otherwise, it's a really actually truly screaming deal at $35. They'll have their actually patent pending scientific speed networking, along with a special section specifically for deal making to reflect what's needed at JPM. They have an amazing structure to their networking events that kind of removes all the awkward and facilitates all of the connecting. It's very cool. I highly recommend going. The venue is Harmonic Brewing, Thrive City at the Chase Center in Mission Bay. It's great. It's casual, gorgeous setting overlooking the bay. They are sensitive to the possibility of weather issues. Regardless, are looking forward to seeing you. And it's just a quick ride from Union Station and the conference center. And Ubers are available, but public transportation also goes right where you need to go. Link to register is in the chat. And again, it's like $35 for a dinner, for networking, and really guaranteed one-on-one connection with the attendees that are going to be there. The price may be increasing as we get closer to the event, so definitely sign up now versus later. It'll be really cool, and Biotech Networks is doing something really cool with their networking approach. Okay, last but not least, next up is Biotech Showcase. So this is a 17-year running premier investor conference that creates a platform for private and micro mid-cap biotech companies, offering them a unique opportunity to showcase their innovations and engage one-on-one with investors and biopharmaceutical executives. Check out the information. You can either go that QR code or register. It is more expensive now. There was a $400 coupon before November 10th. I don't know if the price increases again. If you're interested in all, look into it. There's an in-person and a virtual option. It's a like ever increasingly popular and successful event. So wanted to share that resource with you before this slightly overwhelming slide. So next slide of some events we've curated. We're going to email this to everybody that attends this, so don't feel like you need to jot everything down now. There's way more than this. Refer to Bio and Novatore's app over this list because it's going to have way more. It's going to be growing, but we wanted to give you something to start with events that we knew were happening and that were small company appropriate. All right. We're going to get into it. So I have put some questions together for our panelists, and these are based off of survey responses that a survey was sent out to all of the folks who had RSVP'd yes on LinkedIn. So thank you to all who filled it out. Pulling in a few other burning questions that I know I've been asked, and we're going to start with these. If while we're talking, you have specific questions that come up, put them in the chat. We may not be able to get to everything, but we will get to as many as possible. Raise your hand if you want to voice your question. We've set aside time at the end for a Q&A. We want to make this a lively discussion. So if things come up, absolutely put them in the chat and we'll kind of field live. Okay. Before we dive into our enriching discussion, I'm going to put up a poll. And my thought behind this is that our panelists can get to know who they're talking to and really what their goals are with JP Morgan. If you answer other, put your other in the chat so we know exactly who you are, what your goal is, and we can have our panelists speak to you. All right, we've got one other. I'm still seeing responses come in. We've got about half of our responses. I'll wait till they slow down. Give it a minute. We got 20 seconds left. All right. Some are still rolling in. I'm going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll. Okay. So we had 31% answer that they were going to raise their seed round, or that their goal was JP Morgan to raise their seed round. 24% was raise Series A, 7% raising Series B, 56% partner and networking, and 5% answered other. So the three of you who answered other, please put in the chat what your other goal is. I'd love to hear it. And keep in mind too that people could answer multiple options. So, someone could be both interested in partnering and networking and raising their seed round. Okay. Now that our panelists have a better idea of what they are really gearing their conversation to and who they're talking to, I want to jump in. So we can turn off the screen share and get our panelists pinned. and then let's jump in. First up, for small companies attending JPM week, it can be overwhelming. What advice can you give them to help them navigate the event successfully and make the most of their time and limited resources? Sarah, would you start? I know you've been to
Sure.
JPM a ton of times, and I
I
think
have.
well suited to speak to this.
I have been to JP Morgan a ton of times, even going back to the old H&Q days. So that'll give you a sense of how long I've been doing this. Yeah, and it can honestly be overwhelming. And when you are not participating in sort of the core hotel JP Morgan conference, there's a lot of satellite events and a lot of places you can go. So, what I always tell people, I think it's really important to be clear about what your priorities are for the meeting and what your purpose is. And sometimes that may be simple as, for me, the way I think about it is like, what's a good outcome for me at the end of this meeting? How many people should I be trying to meet? How many people from my existing network am I trying to reconnect with? How do I prioritize? For me, I'm prioritizing FaceTime with clients versus networking with bankers or analysts or investors, and come up with a plan, and then be willing to also throw that plan in the trash once you get there, because something better may present itself, or your plan may not work. So I think you do have to go in with a plan. I think you need to be agile with it. And I would say what I've learned is to pace myself a little bit and not overschedule every day, just to leave a little bit of time for, again, opportunistic meetings, people you meet along the way, people you bump into in the street that you worked with 2 jobs ago. Make sure you have time to connect with those people. Those are great interactions. Make sure you have some time for those. Just kind of going with a plan and a good attitude, I think.
Yeah, I love the good attitude. So what point do you make your list of people that you're, targeting versus wishing to see? When does that happen? Like time of year?
So for me, what's interesting is I'm doing this with and on behalf of my clients right now for them. So my list comes later, but ideally, I'm thinking about it now. I think if you're going to take advantage of something like, the Bio One-on-One Partnering System and the Biotech Showcase and some of these other opportunities, like you should be doing that. If you're not doing it yet, you should do it like immediately. I think those can be really useful events. But you do need to get on, you need to register, and you need to start, getting in that meeting system and making sure that people are still availability can fill up really quick for certain folks. So, I think now is a good time to do that. And again, that leaves you a little time too to, again, if you prioritize, I would go get your priority A kind of meetings calendar filled out as best you can, and then kind of work down a list.
Great advice.
But you should be doing it now, is the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't started. Yeah.
Adrian, do you have anything to add?
I mean, not that much. One of the things that I learned from a couple of clients, not during the JP Morgan, but during the bio 1 or 2 years ago, is that most of them, they wanted to partner with pharma. And part of the plan that Sarah mentioned is that you need to study your companies. And what I told them to do is, read all the things on the web that you can find. Also read the last year reports that they release every year, just to understand what you're looking for and how well they did on the sub-industry that they're working on, and you want to get your asset, right? And then you have all built on, you need also to understand which was the last investment they did, just to not correlate the investment that they did before versus you. I mean, most of them, they follow the portfolio approach and not gonna invest in correlated assets. So need to understand what they did before and what they're gonna do now. And just have like one slide just to understand which will be the strategy that you want to mention to them, right? If you want to partner, how you want to partner, what is the value added that you have for the company, all these kind of things. I mean, probably most of them you already know, but I'm trying to do this kind of checklist before everything. And I try also to do, the list that Sarah mentioned a couple of months ago, just to have everyone. I mean, most of the people, the A list, most of the people, they have everything arranged like 2 months before. So it's a hard thing to do.
So part of the question was, thank you, Adrian, that was fantastic. Part of the question was really managing resources, and resources go really quickly when you're booking hotel rooms in San Francisco. Hoyt, I know that you've been strategic about where you've stayed. Wondering if you could speak to that and give some advice on how to, best manage your resource allocation when it comes to lodging.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I appreciate the question, and I won't ignore it totally, but I think that the time is the precious resource. Like whether you spend 200 or 1,000 on a hotel room, that's, I don't think that that's material. If you take, if you do a good job at JPM, it's your time. Similar, but maybe a little bit different angle from the two colleagues that provide advice. I mean, I divide it up into sort of two games, if you use a sports analogy. It's highly unlikely, unless you're way advanced in discussions, that you're going to close any deal. If you want to raise money, if you want to have a partnership or something like that, it's not going to be signed at JPMH. So, but what you want to do there is you want to either establish or solidify a personal relationship that's the foundation, so they take you much more seriously when you do the follow-up. So the first game is just to have that early meeting that's really successful, and 90% of that work happens before the conference. Identifying the right targets, understanding exactly what stage they're in, what their focus is, what they're investing in now, or what they're partnering in now. And so that you set up your time so that you meet with those folks, because they're going to be much happier and you're going to have more success if it's exactly the right profile. But don't go in thinking that you're going to close deals. These are hopefully half an hour, maybe 15-20 minutes, but half an hour sort of maximum. Your goal is just to win that meeting, so that when you talk to them in a week, they say, oh yeah, Hoyt, I want to take that seriously. Like, I'm going to prioritize my time after the show.
Yeah, I always say the goal is to get another meeting. The goal of that meeting is to get another
And
meeting.
then, but so the second game is the follow-up. And that's when you have a strategy to how you take this to close. And that's sort of how you pay off. And so that's hopefully how you make your slightly outrageously expensive hotel room immaterial. But San Francisco does have a lot of Airbnbs, and they do have outskirt hotels, motel options that are that 15 minutes out of town that are significantly less expensive. So if that certainly I've been there, an underfunded startup. So I mean, you can get that and then just wear comfortable shoes, and so that when you take one Uber into the city and you're there all day and night, and then you take an Uber home, it's not an easy day, but if you have done your work beforehand, then it'll be really valuable. I would also say that while it's nice to run into someone and go to these events and just meet someone cold and exchange business cards, if you can set up a meeting with someone, even if it's 20 minutes ahead of time, and even if they say, I'm going to be at XYZ showcase, let's just run into each other there, I would try and say, can we get together 20 minutes beforehand? Or can we meet at a specific time? Like, getting them to commit to spending a little time with you. They have ownership of it now, and they're going to take it much more seriously, and it's going to be more effective. So it is very easy for someone to say, I'm going to be at the Hit Lab digital health event, so just see me there. It is highly unlikely that you're going to get enough time with them and attention from them, that they're going to really remember that. So it's good to follow. So you gotta do everything you can to get them to commit, even if it's a short amount of time, to use the events as everyone has to be there, but don't rely on getting lucky and running into the right people at the right time.
What kind of tools and strategies are you using to learn about your prospective customers, clients, investors? And Sarah and Adrian, jump in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, Adrian is right. Like, a lot of this information is public, and even if it's not easy to find, like if I'm looking for investment dollars, who are all the seed funds in life sciences? What are they investing? Are they focused on oncology, cardiology? Are they diagnostics? Are they devices? All that information you can find on the internet. It takes some digging, but you're going to get it. And then you use LinkedIn, and you use these tools that Big4Bio has presented, and other associations, to figure out who's going to be there. But again, that's why, the conferences, depending on how crazy you are, somewhere between 2.5 and 5 days. But you should, it should be it should be 90 days at least of really hard work beforehand to make those few days pay off.
Someone had a question about who direct messaged it to me, that asked for any recommendations related to whether to use slides in the short 15 to 20 minute meetings. It seems awkward to try and use slides in such a brief hotel lobby kind of setting.
I think that the caveat is that the other side of the table is much more important. And if you can somehow glean whether they want slides or visual representation, that would be helpful. Probably not is a general rule. But if you have an asset, or if you have something, having one visualization, a printout might even be easier, that you could just pull out and just so that they could visualize what your number one value proposition is. That would be good to have in your back pocket.
From my perspective, I'm more like a storyteller. I personally think that people are hardwired to understand stories. I fully understand what Hoyt said in terms of, if you have an asset and they need to show specific information depending on the industry, probably makes sense to have something to show. But I think if you can craft your value proposition and the main pain points and the opportunity, like a storytelling, probably makes more sense, and people will be more engaged. That's what I try to do always. I think that if you can craft it out in a way that seems more engaging, it will be better, and not just open your laptop and say, I have this great data.
Totally.
Not happen. And one more thing that it's my personal thing. Not everybody is built up for that, but I try to use LinkedIn as try to be up, above the noise that everybody's telling. Right now is like an influencer CEO kind of a deal. So if you can show great information and not just talk about your product or your tool or whatever, people are going to start engaged with you. And if you follow the LinkedIn rules in which you can, post things on the people that you want to meet, I don't mean it's 100% accuracy, right? You're going to get a meeting, right? But if you start building up the relationship in that sense, there has the high odds that you can get a meeting. And also try to decrease the 6 degrees of separation between you and your appointment or potential appointment, right? Takes time and exercise, but I think it's a great tool if you know how to use it, right?
Yeah, and I would agree. Let's call it, realistically, again, if you put on just travel time, most minutes at JPM are 15 to 20 minutes. It's a hard meeting format. And the other thing is, especially towards the end of the day or later in the week, people have met with, done 50 meetings by the time they get to you, or you're the 13th meeting of the day. So I would recommend having a pitch deck. I think it's an important piece of material. I would think the goal is to not present it in that 15 to 20, minute meeting. I usually, recommend people have the laptop out but closed, and ask the other person, either what they would like to discuss, or, propose a here's what I thought we could talk about, and get their feedback. And sometimes they may want to see a presentation. Sometimes I think for the most part, people will not. So I think having the conversation is probably the best. When you do that though, what I would definitely say is you've got to have your pitch down, and it's got to be really sharp, and it's got to be, you got to deliver the takeaway for your company in under 3 minutes. And then, try to get them to engage with some questions and maybe some follow-up and dig into some things, but be really, really strategic about how you describe your company. And some of that requires, as Adrienne and Hoyt have said, knowing a little bit about your audience. Who is this person? Why am I talking to this person? What would be their interests? So you can customize it a bit, but I think you got to be really clear on, what's the 2 or 3 things you want them to remember about you. Make sure you hit it up front. Don't, a lot of people do storytelling where they start, well, I founded this company and I did X, Y, and Z, and it's very linear in terms of, you get to the conclusion after 10 minutes. Do not do that. Conclusion up front. And then that gives you time during the conversation to kind of go back and re-deliver that message multiple times in 15 to 20 minutes, which is hard to do, but you got to be intentional about it, and you got to practice. You got to craft that pitch really, really tight, and you got to practice.
So you mentioned including the conclusion up front, which I think is often, people often get the exact opposite advice and get advice to make that storyline. I'd love to hear kind of, Sarah, your thoughts on that, but also Hoyt and Adrienne as well, and where you land on what you're advising clients to do.
Yeah, again, I come from a public markets background where if I buried the lead, I was done for. That was a career killer. So, I'm really good about hitting people up front with what I think is important, even if it feels out of order or without context. For me, I can always go back and do it again. I'd rather give the message twice up front and at the end. But you really got to grab people's attention up front and tell them why it's important. Why do you want to meet with me? Why am I exciting? Why is this company the one out of the 10 meetings today that you're going to remember? And think of it in terms of that. There's kind of a signal to noise that you got to rise above. So I always do that. Again, I think I coach a lot of, first-time CEOs who are scientists or engineers who have that background. And it's really kind of counterintuitive for a lot of people to not do things out of order like that, but don't bury the lead, do it up front. People's attention spans are short. And again, after day 2 or day 3 of meeting, your meeting number 8, meeting number 9, you gotta get people up front with that, what you want them to remember. So don't be afraid to do it. And I think it's really, it's a success factor for people remembering and even paying attention to what you have to say after.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good advice generally, but even more so in a format like JPM Health, where you have such a limited time and everyone's so busy. But I mean, a pitch deck, you have your executive summary, you have, here's the most important things up front, then I'm going to tell you my story, and then you have a conclusion. And so, if we have preclinical data shows that we can treat ovarian cancer 20% or more better than anything out there right now. And we have a safer and easier manufacturing process. And now let me tell you how we got there. Like, you can still tell your story, but you just have a reason to pay attention to you instead of looking over your shoulder at their next meeting or their competitor who's meeting with someone who they're jealous about. So you gotta get them locked in on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that much to add to that. The only thing that I would probably do if you're looking for partnership, trying to understand the pain points from the people that you're talking to and try to reformulate their pain points as your solution at the beginning. Like a conclusion will be, I'm here to help and solve your issues, right? Something like that. But I fully agree with Hoyt and Sarah saying.
Yeah, that was fantastic. This was kind of an interesting question I'm going to bring up next. So in a world where virtual interactions have become the norm, how do you assess the value of an in-person interaction during events like JPM? What unique benefits can attendees expect from face-to-face networking and meetings that they're missing virtually. And I would imagine that the undertone of these questions, having read a bunch of them, is why should I go if I can do investing from my home?
I mean, I would say that it's 3x at the very minimum, if not 10x plus more valuable to have an in-person connection. Again, even without JPM, these people probably get dozens, if not hundreds, of people outreaching every single day. And if you have some kind of a personal connection, they now have ownership of your relationship too. If it's purely virtual, they can hit decline, they can put it aside, they can leave early, they can miss a meeting. But if they have some ownership of the relationship, again, you have two games. Your second game is trying to close something. But if you have someone who you're talking to has a little bit, at least a little bit of ownership in the relationship with you, you're going to be way more successful. I find that the virtual connections are effective for getting information across and progressing stuff, but it's not a substitute for having a solid foundation.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that, I think, again, I've done more work in investments than business development, but a little bit there too. And, this is I always say, like, a business of aberrations. Stuff goes wrong all the time. No investor expects everything to be perfect. So I think there's a little bit too of, you're investing in people, like, just as much as you're investing in ideas, and often investing in people more than the ideas. The ideas mean nothing if the people aren't there to carry them out. And I do think meeting people in person can just give people just a little bit more confidence and trust in the relationship. And I see that all the time. I think it has huge value. And I know from my interactions, I'm reminded that, every time I go to an in-person meeting right now, how important that is. It just takes the relationship engagement just up to another level, even if you're able to meet people for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I fully agree with what you're saying. I mean, we are social animals, right? We want to be with other people. And the other thing that I feel that it's a totally different, it's a nonverbal activity in which you can see how the people interact with other people, and you can, I don't want to say feel, but you can sense how the relationship and to be empathetic with the other one. If you're in the Zoom meeting, it's never gonna happen. So that's a total different kind of approach.
Also, how are you supposed to know how tall people are if you can never meet them?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably they're not wearing shorts or trousers or whatever, right? It's like you're in TV. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So if you're in person, that's another thing.
So standing out in a crowded field is crucial. What strategies or tactics have you seen small companies employ to make that memorable impression and distinguish themselves at the event? We kind of touched on it with the conclusion up front in the pitch deck. What else can people do?
I mean, I would reiterate something that we've all spoken to a little bit is you're not, I mean, your company, you're very passionate about it, but you're not going to stand out with 35,000 people at JPM to everyone. What you need to do is understand and pick out the right target audience. That's how you stand out, by being exactly what they're looking for.
I mean, the other thing that I will emphasize that is so important is follow-up. If you say to someone, I'll get you that paper, I'll write you an email next week, they ask you for some information, you said, yes, we can get that to you. The other thing that really matters here, and that can really help you stand out, is the follow-up. So doing it quickly and getting, coming through on what you promised that you would deliver to them. And I think that can also make an impression. So putting that work in, maybe it's like you get back to the hotel room at 10:15 at night and you say, gosh, I said that guy that paper, just do it. Don't wait till next week. Get it, follow up, on things that you've promised as fast as you can. That's another another thing that I would emphasize.
Very important. Same day. Yeah, it's got to be within 24 hours, if not sooner.
And the other thing that I found useful, if you want to stand out in the crowd, is that make the other people know that you did your homework and you know exactly what to tell to them and which are the pain points that you are solving with your technology, right? It's great to say we can increase the PFS in any cancer survival by 20% or whatever. But if you can pinpoint which is the thing that they need to, or what they're looking for, I think people are going to say, those guys did their homework and they know what they're doing. I think that makes it look more professional.
Yep, know your audience and do some research on people. I think that's totally appropriate, and I think it only makes you better in the meeting.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. I'm going to go into another question here. Connecting with investors is a top priority for many attendees, of course. Could you share your insights on the best ways to initiate and foster these very, very valuable connections during JPM week? We have our apps available in the partnering systems and Resi and Biotech Showcase. There's everything that happens before JPM as well. I'd love for you to speak to that. Hoyt, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, they're good venture capitalists are going to look at every message that comes in. So if you have, I understand that you invest in seed stage and this, indication and this, and I believe that's exactly where we are. And I'd really like to speak to you. Of course I can share information now, but I'm going to be at JPMH and I'd love to meet you there. They're going to take a look at that. If you can have some sort of association with them, either through, I believe Adrian mentioned it, but if you share mutual connections, or if you heard them speak at another event, even if it was virtual, or you're part of, there's this a group that Victoria and I are part of called the Bullpen. Anything that you can point to, the combination of you being the right target and having some sort of connection, they're going to look at it. But again, once you've met them in person, it's a total game changer. And so that's why you're going there, is to make that connection. Oh, by the way, if you do a shitty job on your first interaction, they'll be very polite, but they won't give you another chance. Like you gotta if you've taken their time and they've read your executive summary and spent some time with you, make sure it is what they're looking for, and you're being honest and transparent and effective.
Yeah, and I would say,
what strategies have you seen work?
Yeah, I mean, there's two types of intros. There's a warm intro and there's a cold intro, right? Where you can leverage your network and get a warm intro, that always wins in my book. Always, always, always. And sometimes there's multiple routes on the warm intro, but that can always work. You're just going to be limited. I mean, that's just limited number of meetings potentially, depending on your network, maybe not. But I would always leverage that first, people that are, friends and family, like, who do you know? Who can you introduce me to? Leverage that as much as you can, because that's always just a higher success exercise than a cold. On the cold outreach, again, I do think these one-on-one systems can be very useful. I think they're not a panacea. I think a lot of times, just because an investor is in there doesn't mean they're necessarily using the system or reading through all the stuff. I do think when we have clients that use those systems, I often supplement them with sending a separate email to someone I know or someone who seems like a good fit. You don't always know in those systems like who the email is going to. Sometimes they're going through depending how big the fund or the group is on the other side. Sometimes it's going through a series of gates that you can't see, where if you just reached out directly to the investor or the business development person directly, you might actually trigger the meeting that way. So I always do both. And again, on the cold email, I don't know. It's funny. I'd be interested in your view of sending the executive summary on the first email. I don't always do that. I sometimes do, again, business up front, like, here's why I'm reaching out to you. Here's what I have. Here's why I'd like to have a meeting, keeping it, pretty tight. I'm happy to send you more information. I find sometimes that at least gets them, kind of the conversation going, and then we can always follow up. I would say too, because of people doing virtual meetings, some people have a preference for it. Not everyone goes to JP Morgan. I also would recommend, would love to meet with you when it's convenient. If you would like to do something in person, I'm going to be at JP Morgan, but I'm also available, basically when it's convenient for you. I did some work for a client a couple of weeks ago. I think we sent out like 20 emails like that, and we got a good response. We set up 2 meetings at JP Morgan and 5 outside of JP Morgan, a couple before and a couple after. So, kind of keep that open too. That's a good outcome in my mind. They know a little bit about you. They're interested, and just because they don't want to meet at JP Morgan, if they want to meet with you virtually, I think that's a win.
Yeah, absolutely. Adrian, I see you nodding along.
Yeah, I'm just nodding because I agree with everything they're saying. I mean, there's no magic trick to do these kind of things. It's hard work.
Yeah.
It's knowing your audience. And I would agree that trying to get meetings takes a couple of months before that, right? If you have a cold outreach, you probably are gonna get a low response. I mean, the one that Sarah got is amazing, but it tends to be lower digit numbers, right?
Yeah,
so
those
it's
friends.
hard.
Those are friends. Those are people I really know. Yeah. So
exactly. But I mean, I think that the thing that you should do, if possible, is to get people, like warm intros. That's, the higher odds to get anything done. But I know it's hard, takes time. Building relationships is not an easy task, right? You need for the other people to trust you, for them to intro you to another one. Is, I know these guys, they know what they're doing. Nobody's gonna do a warm intro just because you ask to, right? So you need to build relationships. That's the only. I mean, I don't want to say that 70% of that is relationship, but trying to get there is hard. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I am going to open up for questions from the audience, and I have one more for our panelists. Would love to hear from everyone though. So raise your hand or put something in the chat, and I'll wait a few minutes here. And I would love, while we're waiting, for Sarah to tell us how it's okay to visit San Francisco, and that there are concerns about safety, but I think we'll all be okay. Yeah,
I know it's hard. Again, I mean, I've lived in New York City and other places, so I think I'm a little not desensitized to it, but I think the reality is, like a lot of cities in the US right now, there are some challenges. I do think there's some kind of basic precautions you can take, especially at night, just kind of, being aware is one of them. And, I think safety in numbers is a good, policy if you can do that. Yeah, and just, again, being aware. I know last year there was quite a bit of, kind of additional security they put in around the conference, which was, quite visible. So, hopefully that will be something similar this year. But yeah, I wouldn't let it deter you. I think just some, awareness is good. And again, in the evenings, just being aware of where you are. Not walking, between neighborhoods when you don't know kind of where you're going, taking an Uber, just kind of basic kind of common sense like that, stuff like that, I think will, ensure that you have a good experience.
Thank you. I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
All right. We have kind of a specific question here. So from your experience, can you share insights on the transition from being a platform company to a therapeutics company, are there common strategies or challenges that small companies should be aware of who are on this journey?
Probably I might ask why you're looking for a transition. I'm asking that because there's a lot of companies that can be, I mean, pharma companies are always looking for platforms since there's a way to the risk investment. But from the side of the companies, there's different ways in which you can capture your value, right? If you're a platform for drug discovery, you can use your platform to get your own assets. That's great. And you can out-license and do whatever you want to do or proceed to phase 2, phase 3 if you have money. But you can do partnerships, co-development, and then you will have two things: early revenue, and then you're going to have external validation, and then you're going to have partners on the format. So it will be interesting to understand what they want to transition. I don't know if they want to be transition from tech bio to biotech or something like that, or what is the strategy that they're looking for, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think, there certainly has, I think a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago, I would say, again, I work with a lot of later stage companies too, and companies running up to IPO and going public. Certainly there was a, platforms kind of had a moment a couple of years ago, and we're getting sort of large public valuations for the platforms, which was, sort of a flip from historical times. People were really excited about those types of stories. And I do think we've kind of gone back to sort of more of a, what I would call like an asset-centric market where people are really focused on, specific programs and things like that. And part of it, frankly, is driven by the funding environment, and platforms are expensive, and people are looking for focus and cost runway and things like that. I mean, I think you can pitch your business where it is today. It's not really appropriate for a seed or a Series A company to be really focused on a pipeline product, especially if they're preclinical or phase 1. I think what you need to focus on is when you go to investors, and which is different. Maybe Adrian could talk about kind of the business development pitch, and definitely a slightly different focus. But for investors, I think you need to figure out what your value creation proposition is. So how are you going to create value? And you can create value as a platform in a number of ways. Adrian talked about a couple of different ways that you can, monetize platform over a period of time. Again, know your investors. Do they have a 2-year window or a 5-year window or a 7-year window? It depends on, who you're talking to. Some investors like platform companies because they have a little bit of a longer window. Some people don't. Some people use DCF, discounted cash flow, to value businesses, and that will always favor people that have clinical programs because they can do it on an asset by asset basis. So I think you got to just put your best foot forward and what you think really unlocks the value in your company. And so you can tell a story about, here's how we're going to take this technology or this platform or this set of assets, and over the next 18 months, 2 years, whatever your time frame is, how we're going to create a lot of value for you, the investor, and why you want to come along with us. So I think both can work. I think you just got to take a very good, serious look, at your technology, what's coming over the next couple of years, and what the value drivers are. And sometimes it's platform, and sometimes it's a program. Audience can be very different there too. So again, the type of investor you may want to target, or the type of BD person you may want to target, may be different based on what that outlook for the company looks like and what those value drivers are.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would add, I've talked to several investors who see this a lot, and I like the idea. Okay, I have a platform, and as Adrian said, like, I'm going to use it. I find that I'm the best one at using it, and so I'm going to be able to develop an asset or multiple assets using my platform and the value add that it provides, and then sort of growing the business on the asset side. If you haven't done that yet, most investors are going to discount the possibility of that happening. And they're just, they've seen it, everyone say that, and very few are successful. If you're asking from an operational standpoint what to do, which is how I took that question, I maybe just misread it because it's related to JPMH, but you're going to need a different mentality, different people, different, approach with the regulatory side of it and the payer side of it. I mean, it's just a very different initiative. And so you need to treat it like that. And so if you're going to keep the platform, it's almost like you spin up another company for the therapeutic or therapeutics, or multiple other companies, is one way that you could approach it. But if you're going to discard the platform and just move forward with an asset or a couple assets, that's a cleaner break. But you're going to need new people, and it's going to be a lot of new.
Thank you guys both. That was a great answer. I want to know, what is a piece of advice, like what specific advice do you feel that you're giving your clients and colleagues that you're advising? What advice do you feel that you give again and again and again?
Speed. So some things take time, and there's no way around it. But there's a lot of things that you can compress if you just work differently, work more, work harder. So every place that you can possibly compress time, do it, because there are things that take longer. But that doesn't mean that you need to take a long time with everything. And so you should, for yourself and for your team, have a sense of urgency. And that's, like Sarah said, like, if someone says, I would like this deck, I would never go to bed without replying and getting everything out that someone asked for, because that's stuff you can control, that stuff you can do super fast. If someone said, I need the results to your phase 1, you say, got it. I will. We anticipate having it takes to have possible.
You cut out for a second there. We kind of missed the last little part of what you were saying, Hoyt. Could you repeat the last, like, maybe 2 sentences?
Oh,
Yeah, sorry about that. I thought everyone else froze, but it was just me.
It's okay.
So you have a limited amount of time to keep people's attention, money, and all this stuff. So every single place in your business that you can compress time, do it, because there are things that are just gonna take time, and that's fine. But what I find is, because something's taking 4 months or 6 months or a year, a lot of entrepreneurs say, I don't need to rush. I don't need to go fast because we have all this time. You don't. Everything that you can possibly do fast, do it fast. Do it like immediately fast, not, and people will notice that. They'll appreciate it. Build your team to think that way. Make sure you're looking that way. And I would say that that's for first-time entrepreneurs, I give that advice to, or I talk to them, and when I say, they ask for advice and they say that's the number one thing that caught them off guard, is they didn't realize how fast everything had to go in order to be successful.
What are specific tasks that you can do really fast? So you touched on replying to an email or attaching a document. What are other things that people can start right away with?
Communicate, like your team, if you're trying to figure out a strategy, right? So like let's figure out a high level product development strategy. That can happen very fast. Some of the things, like, that you need to do to execute that strategy are going to take time, and you can't force people to speed that up. But if your team can't get consensus on the strategy, no one can go to work on executing it. And so you've just artificially delayed your progress.
Yeah, I love that. Control what you control.
from my perspective, I give them two things. The first one is, since most of the first founders, early stage, are scientists, I try to help them and guide them and to get your communication well, right? Learn how to talk about your value proposition, your differentiation features, how you're better than anybody else quickly, and nail it, right? That's the first thing that I always tell them. And also understand your path to profitability. I mean, it could take longer or not, but understand which are all the steps that you need to follow in order for the company to grow, right? If you're a medtech, you need to understand the steps to have an FDA approval if you need it, just a notification or nothing, right? And if you need to have a, let's say, HEOR modeling for insurance or for hospitals or whatever, you need to understand that you need to have it and when to have it and have a plan on that. And as Hoyt mentioned, money and time is the things that run out fast. And the first seed money could take you probably a year, year and a half, 2 years if you're great and you have a great CFO and have a lot of grants or whatever. But that's maybe the things that I try to advise them.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously care about the pitch too a lot. That's what I help people with all the time. It's so important. I think you just have to be very crystal clear about what your value drivers are. And I think the other thing especially with early stage companies, first time CEOs, I just, also remind them, a lot of times people are really excited about their idea. They have a real vision for what they're doing. And that's what's so exciting about meeting with entrepreneurs. And they can take it really personally sometimes when people don't give them a meeting or they don't get the outcome they want their meeting. And what I remind people is, investors are investors. There's a lot of different reasons why they invest in ideas or choose not to invest in ideas. This is a numbers game. So you're going to hear no a lot more than you're going to hear yes. And you need to, kind of get used to that. It's not always a reflection of whether or not you have a good idea. It's not always a reflection on if they like you or they like what you're doing. And you just got to be persistent with that. And also ask for feedback. Not all investors will sort of, just volunteer feedback. But, what I've found is if you ask for feedback, you'll get it. Why aren't you interested in my idea? I would say a little more diplomatically than that, let's say. But it's important to get that feedback. Sometimes this is not an investable idea, or I think you said you needed 20 million to get to this milestone. Based on my vast experience, I think you need 40, or you think it's going to take 6 months. I think it's going to take 2 years. Like, these are all important pieces of feedback to get from people. So, tap into their expertise. Don't take it personally, be persistent. No doesn't mean no forever. And the other thing is, capital formation is a long game. Just because they're not in the seed round, maybe they'll come back for the Series A. Maybe they can't do it now because of the way the fund is structured or where their other investments are. I mean, there's, a lot of different reasons to engage people over time, and again, build those relationships because, over a long career, you meet a lot of people and things kind of come back to you. So that's the other piece of advice I give people.
Yeah, that's great advice. As we wrap up in our final 5 minutes, any final words of wisdom or pieces of advice for small companies attending JPM that we haven't touched on yet?
So I giggled a little to myself when Adrian said there's no magic trick to get people to look at or respond to a cold email. But one trick that I have used successfully in the past is, okay, you're not going to get all your meetings that you need at JPM. It's a wonderful opportunity to have tons of people there who are relevant and to knock off a bunch of them with an efficient use of your travel budget. But there's going to be some people that you engage with virtually instead, to Sarah's point, or that just don't have time there and you catch up later on. I will tell a white lie sometimes and be like, figure out whether, I'm going to be in Chicago. I have to be in Chicago in February. When are you available? And I will structure my trip around then. And so you just say, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at your place of business, so that, and then it's easier for them to say yes, harder for them to say no, if you're going to, but they would feel guilty about saying yes if you're going specifically for them, because they probably don't have the buy-in that you're worth it yet, and they don't want to hurt you. They don't want you to spend all that money just to, have 30 minutes and then get rejected. So if they really are a good target, I have done that, and it has worked, because once you have that personal connection, it does work. And so, I mean, so that's the safety net that you don't get at JPM. But again, if you haven't started already, as soon as we hang up here, start trying to book your top, meetings.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, my piece of advice is to not go into the week depleted. And what I mean by that is it's a tough time of year. Coming off the holidays, beginning of the year, that week before JP Morgan is always just, crazy busy for everyone, kind of getting back after the holiday break. Sometimes you're preparing for JP Morgan on the plane on the way there. I try not to do that. If you can get there, I assume most people have made their travel plans, but if you can get there a day before, just like decompress a little bit, get rid of the jet lag, whatever it is, give yourself a little time to kind of do whatever you need to do to get your energy up. It's a long week. Monday and Tuesday are hard days. I mean, those are the longest days. But it's really important that you show up to every meeting with, your energy and your enthusiasm, and, it's a marathon. So, do what you need to do in the couple days before to, recharge and be your best you that week. You can tell when people are exhausted on Monday. It's not a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was smiling because I used the trick that Hoyt mentioned like quite sometimes. So
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say most of the time it works, but works for me a couple of times.
It works well. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it will, the thing that I'm going to say probably would sound a little bit not so professional, but try to have fun in terms of not feel like stressed about that, and trying to, live the experience and get the most of it, right? Most of the times you're too stressed or too tense to do these kind of things, or you are not able to articulate what you want to do, or you're not good at what you're trying to do. And when you try to have the best experience as possible, it tends to flow better.
I love that. That's fantastic advice. Again, going back to making the real relationships with people, right? Well, thank you to our panelists. This will conclude our formal panel session. I'm going to have another slide that comes up that kind of talks about what's upcoming, but please join me in thanking the panelists for their time and their insights. This has been super fun to chat about, and I'm once again pumped up for JPM. It's I think about it and I get a little exhausted, and then I get super excited. So thank you to our panelists. Lily, could you please put up our upcoming event screen, and we'll do some final closing remarks here, and we'll get everyone on with their day. So tomorrow, Big4Bio and Clinically Media have another webinar that'll be a similar format to this. This one is JPM week for service providers and really thinking about standing out in a crowded field. So when I had solicited the feedback from attendees of that very first webinar, people wanted more information on what to do as a small company specifically, and they wanted information as a service provider. There's tons of webinars for biotechs and for pharma companies, but not really necessarily for service providers. And as a service provider, I fully wholeheartedly agreed, and you know, I kind of myself thought I could use a little bit of advice. So we did a self-serving webinar, and we're going to feature a few service providers that are doing JPM in a few different kinds of ways. We have a representative from CSC Leasing, who's going to really represent kind of that smaller company. They only have 1 or 2 people at JPM. We have somebody who's from a bigger clinical site services company, CSSI, who has like a full day, kind of a resi type thing, but it's free. And then we have, which everybody should look into, by the way. And then we have a representative from JP Morgan who's amazing and works with service providers and technically kind of is a service provider, who's going to speak to a huge big company experience and how she makes it smaller and more tangible. So super excited about that. Different than this webinar, and that this one was a little more focused in life science companies who are developing technologies, where the service providers will be more of your probably not fundraising companies, although they could be, but really companies who are going to JPM to get customers and clients. Next Tuesday, Bio is hosting another JPM week event. They're really going to deep dive into their app and how to make that work for you during the chaos of the week. And there should be a lot of clarity that comes from how you work with it, and really dive into all the events that are being listed and consistently added. So Mackenzie can put something in the chat if she, I think I saw her, she's from Bio. I think I saw her in the participants list. If there's anything else she wants to add, the links to register for both of these webinars are in the chat as well. And that's it. If you want to stay connected, we would love to stay connected. Put your email address in the chat. I'll add it into our network. The video recording is going to be posted on Big4Bio's page. And yeah, we'll stay in touch. There's going to be more of this kind of stuff as we move forward, and we're going to be asking for feedback and really what is interesting to you and what you want to learn about. So we're here for you. This has been so fun to moderate. Enjoy the rest of your evenings and days, and we will reconnect hopefully at JPM.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Very nice to
Bye,
spend time.
bye, Sarah. Bye, Adrian. Thank you so much.
Bye.